Gary Lane is an international master born in 1964. His peak FIDE rating was 2464. He was the Australian champion in 2004. Also in 2004, he played for the Australian Olympiad team, where he beat Nigel Short in a key victory that sealed a 2-2 tie with Australia and Gary Lane's former country, England. Recently in 2015, he beat Luke Van Wely in a tournament in Australia. Here's a picture of Gary Lane from his Wikipedia page. Okay. Lane is an author of at least 30 different chess books. I thought I would take a look at one of his games, considering I own several of his chess books. So he's a very strong player, and I found a game that he played in this line, the Latvian Gambit, that I took a look at in a video recently. So Lane was white. He was rated 2444 at the time, and his opponent was only rated 1973. So let's see how a strong international master handles this opponent rated almost 500 points below him. Okay, Lane opened e4, and the players played a Latvian Gambit. Okay, they went down the main line. Knight takes e5, queen to f6, d4, d6, knight to c4, f takes e4. You can learn a little bit about this opening in a recent video I made. I'll put a link in the description. But right here, Lane deviates from the main line. Main line is knight to c3, the point of which is to attack the e-pawn, and that allows the queen to move over to g6 to protect it, and the queen is vacated this f6 square, so the next move black can make is knight to f6, putting two defenders on that important e-pawn. Well, Lane had an entirely different positional idea in this position that looks very strong to me. He played bishop to e2. The point of this is the black queen would like to go to g6 to protect the e-pawn, since knight to c3 is coming, and black would like to vacate that square and put his knight on f6 to further support the pawn. But he cannot play queen to f or queen to g6 in this position because of the move bishop to h5, winning the queen. So that's Lane's idea. It's important to sometimes think about what moves your opponent wants to make and then stop your opponent from making them. So black continued with knight to c6. I want to look at another game I'll do in my next video where black plays d5, which at first glance looks strong to me to get this solid center and drive away the knight. But it's an illusion. It's not very strong, it turns out, and we'll take a look at that in my next video. So this player played knight to c6 and then d5. Now the point of d5 is to cut off this e-pawn so that the black pawn on d6 can never come forward to its aid, and white will try to attack the e4 pawn. Knight to d4, knight to c3 attacking e4, bishop to f5 defending it. Remember, queen to g6 is impossible as a defense, so the bishop comes to the defense of the e-pawn. The knight to e3 threatens to remove the defender. So white's threat is knight takes bishop, and after knight takes bishop, the queen cannot recapture because that would leave protection of the d4 knight, and the d4 knight would be lost. So the knight would be forced to recapture, and then white would pick up the e4 pawn. Okay, so black deals with that threat by getting rid of his knight and taking on e2. Okay, white recaptures, and now if white does take the bishop, the queen can recover the piece and protect e4. Okay, black castles long, hoping to get a rook on the e-file to further protect that weak e-pawn. But queen to c4 shows white's intent to attack on the queen side. There are no pieces over here to defend the castled king. And notice the king side is still completely undeveloped. Okay. White has a strong threat in this position, which is the move knight to b5. And black has to stop that threat, so black played e6. But just to show the threat, suppose black decides to protect their e-pawn and follow through with their plan of rook to e8. Well, then knight to b5 threatens a mate here on c7, and it turns out there's no good way to defend against the mate. The queen cannot fall back to this 7th rank to protect because the knight will take the bishop and the queen cannot recover the piece without being mated. Also, the rook cannot defend laterally either because of the move, because of the move knight takes bishop, queen takes knight, and then there's a fork here, knight takes d6, and the pawn on c7 is pinned. So there's no good defense to the attack on c7, so black has to simply stop the knight from getting to b5 in the first place, and he plays a6. Okay. Well, white could win a pawn here since black didn't have time to guard e4, so white could play knight takes e4 and have a good position, but white is after a lot more than just a pawn. He wants to continue attacking the king, and since black just pushed his pawn to a6, that encourages white to push to b4. So when you see a pawn coming forward like this, I like to call that a hook into the position. Some people call it that. You can play b5, and this pawn allows you to potentially open a file quicker than if the pawn were on its original square. So white hopes to open the b file in this position. Bishop to d7 lends support to the b5 square, defense to the b5 square. Bishop to b2, putting the bishop in line with the queen. The queen is safe for the moment. For example, knight takes e4 just drops the bishop. The bishop is unprotected. So black plays rook to e8 to guard the e4 pawn. Then a4 to further protect b5 to play b5 on the next move. King to b8, getting off of the c file where the queen is pointed. Rook to b1. The b file is going to open soon and the rook is well placed there, but more than that, the rook is defending the bishop, so there is a discovery threat with this knight. Black has to watch out for that knight moving, and there will be an attack on his queen. So queen moves back to e7, and b5, intending to pry open a file here, but black doesn't have it. He pushes a5. And now we're at a critical moment in the game. Material is equal, but white has much better development. Notice these kingside pieces still haven't developed. So white needs to open lines in the position. If he allows black to close off the position, then his lead in development won't mean anything. So for example, castling seems like a reasonable move to continue your development and bring another rook into the attack, but the problem with castling is black would respond with b6 and lock up the pawns. And there's no way for white to break through, and black will catch up in development. The game will be about equal. So white plays an excellent move here. and plays b6 himself. Okay, and this guarantees a file is going to open. So black takes the pawn, queen to d4 to attack the b6 pawn, king to a7 to guard it, bishop to a3 releases another attack on the b6 pawn, so black's queen falls back to guard it, and then knight to c4 puts another attacker on the b6 pawn. So white has 3 attackers on that pawn and black only has 2 defenders. And there are no other pieces that can defend b6. And b6 is pinned, it can't move forward. So white's next move is going to be either knight takes or rook takes, and there will be open lines to this king with insufficient defenders. So black actually resigned in this position rather than seeing his king get entirely attacked here. Let's see what the engine says. Yeah, with no material, no extra material, white is up 10.3 in the position. So I think resigning was warranted. All right, it was fun to see a strong player play the Latvian Gambit, and I got to know Gary Lane a little bit, and I'll continue to read his books. Thanks for watching.